Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the second workshop. It looks like we're getting one more person as we speak. So Stavros, we're just saying welcome right now. So I have already lit some incense, and I'll light another stick as this is almost finished, but just wanted you to know we're entering holy space. And there's a 215 number who just came in, so we'll introduce ourselves in just a little bit. But this beginning from Jerry Bowes, continuing from our King beginning last week, call forth your warrior. Your warrior brings focus, service, and execution. At his core, your warrior is about boundaries. He protects that which is precious to you and to those you love. He is decisive. He is clear. His steadfastness creates trust for everyone around. His service to the king creates safety, comfort, and peace for everyone in your life. Welcome your warrior as your ally tonight. Aho. Then, as a kind of, again, I don't like the word sensei question because, it kind of smacks of like we can say whatever we want and not having regard for other cultures or other whatever. This is a rhetorical question then to ask you and to have a moment of silence after that. So from last week, we remember that the tyrant energies are often mistaken for warrior energies. Who in your life radiates safety, comfort, and peace? Pure warrior energy. And how do you relate to those energies? So sit with that for a moment and then we'll check in. Okay, let's begin. Mike, would you check in?
There it is. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, Mike Anderson here, Majestic Buck. Checking in.
Oh, I forgot to give you the prompt. I'm sorry. Check in with your name, where you're from, your primary feeling, and just a sentence or two about aspect of warrior in yourself. So name, where you're from, primary feeling you're experiencing, and just a touch about where the warrior is in you. So go ahead.
Good, that's good. Mike Anderson, Majestic Buck from Naugatuck, Connecticut, New England community, Connecticut community. Checking in, anxious. My warrior, I live in my warrior. I'm a felon. I spent 3 years in Jericho is how I came to this MKP, and battling the prejudices of felons in society these days is kind of where I live. So I'm constantly in my warrior. And did that hit all of them there, Daniel?
I think so, yeah.
All right, well, I'm in.
All right. Michael, your gold and your shadow are welcome here.
Oh.
Scott.
Scott, San Diego, anger, and where the warrior is showing up this week is aggressiveness, and my struggle with it, and I recognize that it's there, and it's come up in a lot of unhealthy ways, and that I perceive. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Complete.
Oh, welcome.
Oh,
Stavros, would you check in?
hello everybody. I'm Stavros, Noble Radiant Owl. I'm feeling anxious, and where my warrior energy is, I'm more in touch with where it isn't. Because certainly this week was a week of things to get done of my own volition, as well as many things that I had to do, which did get done. But you see how that I sidestepped my warrior consciousness is most pronounced to me, and I know that's not in keeping with your question. Where did we find it? But I am, but indeed, I'm more lover conscious by nature, and that's where I dwell this week. And with that, I'm in.
Oh,
And Stavros, remind us of where you live, where you're calling from.
New York City.
New York City, okay. Very good. 215-510-4107. You want to check in? I think I know who that is.
Hey, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Eric Zurich from Philadelphia, and glad to be on the call. Checking in with, what am I checking in with? I guess a little fear and a little bit of anger and joy. And then warrior in my life. I guess so. Right now I'm looking at either starting a business or moving out of being employed, and so that's where the warrior right now is active for me. And yeah, with that I'm in.
Very good.
oh.
And I realized I didn't check in last time, though I did check out, so I'm going to check in today. Daniel Schlorff, Sage, in Wallingford right now, Connecticut, and Metro New York, tri-state area, right on the border of New England. And checking in with happiness, joy, relief. And where the warrior shows up in me is I'm a fierce defender of boundaries and process. So when something doesn't happen the way it's supposed to, or the way it should, the way we've all agreed upon it to, I stand up in a social justice-y kind of anger. Not necessarily inappropriate, but okay, yeah. But in a way where people recognize that, oh, I've stepped on something and maybe we need to step back and start over something. So that's where I am. Thanks all for checking in. All right, let me skip over this. In the iGroup version of this, we would have created as covenant together. We're skipping over that since we didn't do that last week. And we'll go right into, yeah, go ahead, Stavros.
The covenant would be the covenant of confidentiality.
Yeah, confidentiality, or muting your mics when you're not speaking, or like just how we're going to be together, because it's a different process. It's not a normal iGroup type thing. So
yeah, I would like to make it really known.
Oh, sure.
And I was a little surprised. I didn't realize that it was. And I'm okay with it because I watched it and it was fine. But you're posting this on YouTube for all to see. It is not a locked group or a closed group, but anybody can tune in. And although I did not say anything last week that I would not say in a big auditorium with a bunch of strangers, it did cross my mind to be totally open-hearted with my brothers here. but it's something that I would not want to do on YouTube. And I think that's something that is salient, to our discussion, because the fact is the world is watching what we're saying.
Okay.
Or what the world can watch. I'm not trying to. I really appreciate what we're doing, but that is something that is on my mind, and and I think everyone should know that.
Yeah.
Going into this today and every week. So
Yeah.
and I can do this, and I really want to, and I'm not holding back, but I'm being more discerning.
Okay. Yes. Please be discerning.
Yeah, because I've got shadow that would be a release to me to tell my brothers.
Sure.
And I would even, and I would be grateful for the opportunity to do that, but I would not be grateful to have done it in cyberspace.
Okay.
So that's
all right. I did post on all the announcements that this would be recorded. This is in partial fulfillment of the Doctor of Ministry program at Pacific School of Religion, and so I'm presenting this to a committee. And also, I wanted this to be available to uninitiated brothers.
All good, yeah.
But I wanted initiated brothers to be participating in the creation of this group, because we have a common understanding and we have a common framework. And so for the discussion portion of it, I wanted it to be available to just initiated MKP brothers. So, again, if you feel that you can't participate in this because you're afraid that it, or not afraid that it, but you realize that it would become public and don't want to divulge anything, that, go ahead and log off, and no judgment, so just.
Speaking of myself, I want to stay in, and
Okay.
I do it with that awareness. That's all.
Yeah.
And with
Very
my brothers, I mean, if I was on stage with you all, in a demonstration group or an open group to bring new members in, I would be open, but open to a degree in a real I group with maybe like a dozen, and I even trust you to show the people that you answer to in studying for your doctorate. I would, but it's just,
Okay.
not to make an issue out of it, but just I don't know if anyone who wasn't aware of it or of that, and I became aware of it, then I think it's something to keep in mind, not to inhibit you, but just to proceed with awareness.
Got it.
Okay.
All right.
Enough said. Okay.
All right. Thank you. And thanks for raising consciousness around that. Yeah, Mike?
I just want to thank Stavros for that, because I did forget that. And I have a want for you, Daniel, as the leader of this, to possibly remind one of us men, if you think, especially me, if I start to wander, because I've done I groups on the video like this more than a few times. I kind of feel that that's the energy I'm getting, and I'm very open in my I group, but I do want to keep my shield up if I'm open to the world.
Okay.
So just maybe you can put a reminder if I start to wander. I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, now we're all on the same page again, and we can move forward. Who has their book with them? Yeah. Would somebody like to read the beginning of chapter 6, starting on page 75, the first 2 paragraphs?
I'll do it.
Okay, great.
Chapter 6, The Warrior. We live in a time when people are generally uncomfortable with the warrior form of masculine energy, and for some good reason. Women especially are uncomfortable with it because they have often been the most direct victims of its shadow form. Around the planet, warfare in our century has reached such monstrous and pervasive proportions that aggressive energy in itself is looked upon with deep suspicion and fear. This is the age in the West of the soft masculine, end of quote. and it is a time in which radical feminists raise loud and hostile voices against the warrior energy. In the liberal churches, committees are removing such warlike hymns as Onward Christian Soldiers and the Battle Hymn of the Republic from the hymnals. What is interesting to notice, however, is that those who would cut off masculine aggressiveness at its root, in their zeal, themselves fall under the power of this archetype. We can't just take a vote and vote the warrior out. Like all archetypes, it lives on in spite of our unconscious attitudes towards it. And like all repressed archetypes, it goes underground, eventually to resurface in the form of emotional and physical violence, like a volcano that has lain dormant for centuries, with the pressure gradually building up in the magma chamber. If the warrior is an intellectual, if the warrior is an instinctual energy form, it is here to stay, and it pays to face it.
Great. So you mentioned masculine aggressiveness being hidden or subdued. What are some examples of that? And maybe that's a place to start. And by the way, this was written 30 years ago, and it was a much different climate. And we're going to be talking about stuff that's 30 years later today, later in this. And so is it still true that that the age of the West is soft masculine? And is it still true that feminists raise loud and hostile voices against the warrior energy? And is it still true that the warrior is not in vogue?
I think that we're still in confusion about it.
Okay.
To be sure, and and there's been no resolution, and there's clarity in some areas, and haze in others.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, women are definitely men are feeling usurped by women with their newfound masculinity and or masculine essence that women have, and men are confused, particularly with the Time's Up movement. I think. Okay, I'm sorry, I said a lot.
Thank you.
So this is Mike Majestic Buck. I feel at this time men are under attack from every single part of society, in every way. Just like the Me Too and kind of what Stavros had said, and equal pay, and it's almost I feel like we are the whipping boys. We are the men now are just and I would say white men in particular are very we are the whipping boys now. For whatever reason, I don't know, but that's kind of how I feel. So I'll just leave that.
Are white men the whipping boys, or is it just that white men were not accustomed to being challenged, or something in between?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would say that for every, it seems like every problem that I read about, it seems to be, it was like, oh, there's those bad white men that did all this, but I don't know. That's just how I feel.
Okay. And to play devil's advocate, some would say yes, because white men have done grievous things. And I think there's truth on both sides. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to offer that. I hear what they're saying, and as a white male, a lot of it I feel it's self-imposed. I mean, white men have done some horrible things in the past, and I may have contributed to that in my previous youth. So yeah, I agree. So really, to me, it's about understanding that and kind of embracing it, and and living with that. And, what could I do as a white man to help, kind of move us away from that?
Okay.
Well, the very mission of MKP is to raise us from old stereotypes of what the masculine is. And, and I think in our culture, it has always been the shadow, or primarily the shadow and undeveloped two quadrants that of the masculine that has been most publicized or put in view for people to use as cultural reference points.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are part of that. We're actually allied with what Time's Up. They're our allies. And so as far as MKP is concerned.
For those of us unfamiliar with it, would you explain, Stavros, what Time's Up is all about?
Time's Up is part of the Me Too movement. And as I understand it, it is women reclaiming or stating that old methods and modalities of communication in the power structure between men and women, time's up with that we're not doing that anymore. And so that's how I understand it.
Okay.
I would like to say that I think my thinking comes more from being raised a Catholic, believe it or not. I believe that the learnings from the church that I went to for most of my life is turn the other cheek, be subdued, don't be that man, don't stand into your manhood. So I believe that the majority of how I think now started and is fortified by that. So
Okay.
I don't know if that enters into this conversation.
Yeah. Well, to close the circle, before you mute yourself, would you explain the connection? I see what you're saying, the connection between turn the other cheek and warrior. Would you kind of, is it the mentality of buck up and get over it? Or can you explain that?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's be meek and mild, suck it up and do what you have to do. Don't speak your truth. Don't have wants. You just have to be the man and do what you have to do. It's kind of how, and you don't kind of like, I don't have a say in what I want, you just have to deal with it. It's kind of how it was for me, but it does not, from my, it doesn't, I'm looking for the words, but it doesn't tell me to be the man. It doesn't. I mean, it says to do things, but on one hand, take care of everything, but on the other hand, it's telling me like, no, you just got to accept what it is and be quiet and because you scare people, or that type of a thing. I don't know. It's hard to say, but
yeah, I hear you. And certainly some psychologists would call this as something that's the phenomenon is something that stems from like infantile rage. In fact, there's something written about it a few paragraphs later. Let me read those two paragraphs, beginning with all we have to do on page 76. All we have to do is glance over the history of our species, a history which has been defined in large part by war. We see the great warrior traditions in nearly every civilization. In our century, the whole globe has been convulsed by 2 world wars, actually more than that. A third and final one, despite the recent east-west thaw, still hangs over our heads. Something is going on here. Some psychologists call our human aggressiveness emerging out of infantile rage, the child's natural reaction to what Alice Miller has called poisonous pedagogy, the abuse of baby boys as well as baby girls on a massive scale. We believe there is much truth to this view, especially in light of the prevalence of what we would be calling the shadow warrior. But we believe that the warrior should not be identified with human rage in any simple way. Quite the opposite. We also believe that this primary masculine energy form there are feminine warrior myths and traditions too, persist because the warrior is a basic building block of masculine psychology, almost certainly rooted in our genes. And so once again, it goes to the primordial root of us. You know, it's not fair to say, well, you know, anger and rage and aggressiveness and those things are bad because they're masculine, and being demure and calm and just letting things slide by is feminine. We have to think a little more nuanced than that. I also wanted to say what's notable here is that Moore and Gillette have begun this chapter in a very negative and even apologetic view of the warrior. From this point forward, however, they begin to parse things out, suss things out, and talk about extending the benefits of the highest human virtues as being the primary function of the warrior. Extending the benefits of the highest human virtues. So why don't we take a few moments to think about how many traits of the mature warrior we can generate. And that includes militaristic and non-militaristic. And I realize that I'm doing this before we read the description that Moore and Gillette have written. But I just want to see how we compare to what they have generated. So can you think of any ways, can you generate any ways where the mature masculine warrior is in conversation with the world and with others in ways that are either militaristic or non-militaristic? Take a moment and think of that, and just chime in when you can.
I see it show up in strength through love. Strengths in understanding that that war, you know, the act of actually killing or hurting somebody else, is a very unhealthy, path to pursue in terms of wanting to. Let's leave it at that. So to me, the mature warrior is somebody who's been down that path and says, wait, that's not the path to go down. There are much more healthier, stronger, you know, choices that we can be making. So that to me, when I see the mature warrior, that's what I see. Is someone that's grown from the adolescence who thinks hitting and beating and demeaning and poisoning others. You know, that's, you know, I've grown from that. I've matured from that.
Okay. And you mentioned love also? Yeah,
love. That to me embodies the mature warrior, is someone that embraces and sees that love is really, in all its cliche, it's, you know, all you need is love. It's like, you know, versus, you know, war, I'm going to beat you up. And the only way for me to win is to put you down. Yeah. What's that, the quote from King? Darkness cannot drive out dark, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can. I think that embodies that. To me, that was the mature warrior.
Yeah. There's a folk musician, David Wilcox, who I love. He talks about, well, one of his lyrics is, fearless love makes you cross the border. And it's so simple, but it's so true. He was saying this in reference to the whole story of, you know, the neighbor who, you know, had a broken fence. Now whose fence is it to mend? And, you know, and they're enraged over this for generations until one person just goes over and fixes the fence, you know, and then that creates a dialogue between, you know, it's so simple. And so warrior can absolutely embody fearless love. I think that's a great point. Stavros, you wanted to say something?
Sure, yeah. I think the question is that we see the highest manifestation of warrior energy. Where do you see it? I see it as harnessing strength and resolve in a non-reactive way. That is to say that I'm not dependent or totally subject to outside forces to summon my strength. I'm not doing it in reaction. And that if I am doing it in reaction, what is, the source of that reaction? Is it out of fear that warrior energy is pure in itself and not derived from as an offshoot of another stimulus? And that it's and to see it as yours to own and your choice, not to say, well, I had to do that, and that the power of distinction.
Mm-hmm. I can tell someone's been reading his Robert Moore. And it also goes back to last week when we were talking about the difference between, reacting out of your reptilian brain versus responding through your cerebral cortex. If we just react and we make a harsh decision, then boom, we're emotional, we're not calm, we're not collected, we're not all those things that we call virtuous. Yeah.
And furthermore, the warrior is fearless in his perception. That is to say, that he's willing to look at the unpleasant and face. Carl Jung, I've heard it said recently. This guy Jordan Peterson was quoting Carl Jung and saying, "Your truth is where you least want to look for it."
Yeah.
And so the warrior will face the fire, face the storm, face the darkness, and and that's good. That's the choice to do that.
What I'm hearing behind what you're saying, maybe if I could frame it in this way, is lack of defensiveness too.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're being critiqued, we can step back and say, "Oh, okay, maybe I am X, Y, and Z," and rather a self-analysis instead of, again, going to that reptilian brain place and reacting and say, "No, I'm not."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I find it interesting that I go kind of in a different way. I really connect with what Scott said about love, and I kind of go to the family, and I look at real warrior is like, that guy who hates his job, but he's working 12 hours a day so his children and his wife could be comfortable. That to me is like warrior. In my own personal life is standing up for what I think are uneducated ideas that are out there about certain types of people in the world. Is how I see warrior. On a theoretical spectrum, I don't really think of it like that. I see it more, like I said, on a daily life scope.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to throw that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. The activism that you've demonstrated to me, Mike, certainly demonstrates warrior, speaking up for what is right, speaking up for the good, and educating people too. Absolutely. Just pulling them aside and say, "Look, I think your perception may be wrong here. Here's some information." And, if they operate out of their reptilian brain, that's on them. You've taken a step back and you've given them an opportunity to reflect. And if they don't accept that, that's their responsibility, not yours. So absolutely. Yeah.
A lot of fear around that too.
Yes. Oh, yes. I hear what you're saying. Yeah. I want to read a section for you, and let's see. Actually, it's actually a quite long section, so let's break it up. Scott, would you read the first 2 paragraphs of Warrior in His Fullness, beginning on page 79? And this will give us more, this is the education component of this session today. And so read the first 2 paragraphs. Make that make that 3 paragraphs, and I'll read the last one.
Okay. The warrior in his fullness. The characteristics of the warrior in his fullness amount to a total way of life, what the samurai called a do. Pronounced do. These characteristics constitute the warrior's dharma, mad or tao, a spiritual or psychological path through life. We have already mentioned aggressiveness as one of the warrior's characteristics. Aggressiveness is a stance towards life that rouses, energizes, and motivates. It pushes us to take the offensive and to move out of a defensive or holding position about life's tasks and problems. The samurai advice was always to leap into battle with the full potential of ki, or vital energy, at your disposal. The Japanese warrior tradition claimed that there was only one position in which to face the battle of life, frontally. And it also proclaimed that there was only one direction, forward. In the famous opening scene of Patton, the general in full battle gear, pearl-handled revolvers on his hips, is giving a motivational speech to his army. Patton warns his troops that he is not interested in their holding their position in battle. He says, and I quote, "I don't want to get any messages saying that we are holding our position. We are advancing constantly. We are not interested in holding on to anything except the enemy. We're going to hold on to him by the nose, and we're going to kick him in the ass. We're going to kick the hell out of him all the time, and we're going to go through him like crap through a goose." End quote. Proper aggressiveness in the right circumstances strategically advantageous to the goal at hand, is already half the battle.
How does the warrior know what aggressiveness is appropriate under the circumstances? He knows through clarity of thinking, through discernment. The warrior is always alert. He is always awake. He's never sleeping through life. He knows how to focus his mind and his body. He is what the samurai called mindful. He is a hunter in the Native American traditions. As Don Juan, the Yaqui Indian warrior sorcerer in Carlos Castaneda's Journey to Islam says, a warrior knows what he wants and he knows how to get it. As a function in his clarity of mind, he is a strategist and a tactician. He can evaluate his circumstances accurately and then adapt himself to the situation on the ground, as we say. And so that's a lot of adjectives, a lot of descriptors about the warrior. But are you getting the sense that the warrior is more than just this, like the general Patton militaristic thing is only part of the story, the hunter. I mean, why don't we use the word hunter instead of warrior these days, right? Or strategist or tactician, someone who has a great mind and is willing to use, like mathematics to solve a mathematical equation, So what are some of the descriptors that stood out to you? And we'll just do that briefly, then we'll move on.
Movement, moving forward. That it's a constant. So it's not about standing still. It's really about moving forward. And let's leave it at that.
Yeah, very good.
Patton only was one facet of it, and his facet was just the clarity of direction without distraction.
Yes.
And that's very one-dimensional. And I think what stood out for me is under the what is appropriate was the term they used, and what that means to me is not to be a warrior out of rage, a warrior out of resentment, a warrior out of reaction. That if firmness is needed, it doesn't have to be fighting or the warrior. It could be being firm. Like Mike talked about, standing up, for what's right, and to do it with a self-clarity and ownership.
Yeah. So now here's the application on life part. how can we apply clarity and direction and all of those descriptors in our career or in academics or in our primary relationships, in dating, in accounting and finance, or saving money for retirement or leadership or other areas of our life? Like, how can we be pure warrior in ways that actually affect us? Yeah, Scott?
So, to draw back on what I said, moving forward, to me, what that speaks to me is instead of rejecting when people, like the Me Too or discrimination, saying that's not me,
Mm-hmm.
People before me or my ancestors, but it's really understanding and embracing the pain that they're going through and what they're experiencing. And so to me, it's about really moving forward and educating myself to the other perceptions of those around me.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding. So it's constantly learning, constantly growing, understanding new perspectives, and really embracing that we are a very diverse culture with different backgrounds, different background thinking, and just learning to respect and love that about us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pretty interesting. So what I heard, is I'm going to go out and I'm going to kick ass, and I'm going to be just as bad MF. I am going to be that guy. I'm just you don't mess with me. I'm at you. So that last segment, that's kind of what I got out of it. Speaking to what you just said, living with the other archetypes, being our king, being able to control and pull back that fierceness when you have to, knowing when and how to partial out your warrior, I think is how you move forward. And I will say I failed miserably at all the things that you mentioned about saving money and all this stuff. It's kind of funny. I smiled when you said that. But for the warrior part, I think that's it, is knowing how to utilize that fierceness within me in an appropriate manner for each time that I need it, or each situation that might come up where I need it. Just knowing how to utilize it properly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean.
So, Mike, you muted yourself before I could ask you this question. So you've had trouble in other areas, but in what areas of your life, in what other areas other than what you mentioned before, do you demonstrate warrior? Where are you focusing your attention? And again, you don't have to get too specific, but just kind of in generalities.
So I'm a 58-year-old man. I spent 39 years of my life working on ships going around the world in the merchant marine. I've seen a lot. I've done a lot. Right now, I'm really focused in men's work. I love, I'm just starting a new open circle. I'm in another circle, support group for felons like myself. Besides that, so I'm really focused on connecting with men and trying to give them or show them how to get what I've gotten from MKP. That's really where most of my energy is these days.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to reflect back to you what I've heard. So you've said that, well, I haven't really put a lot of investment in time, finance and everything like that. But here's all the other great stuff that I have in my life, and I want to share that with everyone else. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So,
So one way that, I got a piece of,
go ahead, Eric.
we have a sec. Yeah, so one way that I feel we can apply the moving forward to today, or at least that piece that was just read, is to find a mentor, not fearing. For me, for example, finding a mentor, and especially in the industry that I'm in, I mean, in any industry, if you find a mentor, you can definitely, at least get over the learning curve and learn the best practices right away. in any, not even industry, but in any part of your life. And the fear of reaching out to someone who's successful or someone who's been there and done that before is definitely, for me, it was overwhelming when I was younger. And now it's still there, but I've gotten so much gold from speaking with others who've been either in my shoes or who are in a place where they where I want to be at one day. And that has absolutely, I think that is one way to keep moving in our lives in a good way.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's about it.
Aho.
Yeah. The samurai did not get where he got without having a proper mentor and years of experience with that mentor. Years of
Right.
building a relationship and finding out what makes that person so successful. So that's absolutely true. And you're foreshadowing what the next section is going to be. You don't have to answer this publicly, but think to yourself of ways where you'd like to invite warrior energy in right now. If you want to respond, you can, but what are the circumstances or situation in life that are preventing you from taking that leap right now? What is it that's blocking you from moving forward or reaching out for what it is you want?
Fear of success.
Yeah, fear of success. Scott?
Fear of failure.
So both fears. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. How would you be different if you chose to radiate your warrior energy in these two areas of life, the fear of success and fear of failure? If you just summoned the warrior within and invited that into that situation. So just two things to think about. So moving on to the samurai, Eric. Contrary to stories of police brutality and military sadism around Abu Ghraib, remember that, the mature warrior has total control over his mind and his attitudes, as Gillette described the archetype anyway. So consider the story, which the authors include to illustrate the point. And if you have your book, page 84, moving in the direction, there is a story about a samurai. So I'll read it. There was a story about a samurai attached to the household of a great lord. His lord has been murdered by a man from a rival house, and the samurai was sworn to avenge his lord's death. After tracking the assassin for some time, after great personal sacrifice and hardship, and after braving many dangers, the samurai found the murderer. He drew his sword to kill the man. But in that instant, the assassin spit in his face. The samurai stepped back, sheathed his sword, and turned and walked away. Why? He walked away because he was angry that he'd been spat on. He would have killed the assassin in that moment out of his own personal anger, and not out of his own commitment to the ideal his lord represented. The execution of the man would have been out of his ego and his own feelings, not out of the warrior within. So in order to be true to his warrior calling, he had to walk away and let the murderer live. Then the next sentence says, the warrior's loyalty then and his sense of duty are to something beyond and other than himself and his own concerns. Is that a so when I think of religion, I think of the term holiness, which isn't really what it sounds like. It's not about like being pure or puritanical. anyway. It's about having the right intentions and the right motivations for certain things, you know. And so when I look at this samurai, I think in the Christian tradition of the meaning of holiness, and I think, wow, you know, he was really holy. He was wanting to have very pure intentions behind what he was doing, not to kill the guy out of his own personal ego, but he wanted to do it out of the right. So maybe he caught him later and killed him then. But that's warrior. That's what a warrior is. The warrior didn't have anything to do with, you know, I mean, maybe he wanted to kill the guy, you know, to avenge his lord. But warrior in this case meant not being a murderer in that sense. Yeah. Any other responses to that provocative passage?
Big time. Big time.
Yeah.
I what stood out for me was that you know, in MKP we talk about or part of the masculine is having a purposeful life, but I think in this case what he demonstrated is that he has a guided life. And that's something that, you know, it's very meaningful to me, to have an overseeing wisdom to guide me, something greater than myself, a higher power, and that, you know, to have done it out of rage would have been what the next sentence says, being at the hero stage,
yes,
being the immature version of the warrior, where the hero sees himself at the center of everything, you know, and responds from that point also, which is a point has to do with survival and reaction. So he was clearly at an ascendant place in fullness, to be part of something a bigger energy, a bigger power than himself that guides him. So whenever he is in doubt, he has some place to go. He has some place to carry him.
Yeah,
it's spirituality.
Right. Right. Eric, I noticed you're not on mute. Did you have something to say? To put you on the spot?
Hey, no worries. No, I muted myself on my phone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I just thought an example was kind of interesting. Like, this guy the samurai was sent out to kill this murderer, and he didn't, because at that moment he felt the anger. But I felt, you know, wouldn't that still be like not fulfilling his primary objective if he was sent out by, you know, the king? That was the first thought that came to me. Okay, I understand that he was angry at the moment, and that form of warrior is respectable, but on the other hand, he still didn't fulfill. Well, I don't really know the whole story, but I'm guessing from that little bit, that's what I got from that.
So
because
for
he's still
you,
doing his duty.
For you, you're looking at it more of a categorical imperative, like his position was to kill this man, and therefore the ends justify the means. For this warrior, for the samurai, it was the means that were more important than the ends.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Can I add?
No, I get that.
Okay. Yeah, Stavros.
That, you know, the form was killing, but the content was justice. So it's a difference of form and content. So his plan was to kill this person, but the content was out of justice, not out of revenge or rage. So he stayed true to the content of his mission.
Right. Yeah. If he had killed him out of rage, then his purpose behind the purpose of justice would have been erased almost. So what you're saying,
it had nothing to do with his master being killed.
that's
either.
right. That's right.
The whole purpose would have been lost.
Yeah, that's right.
Great story.
And so to think through that, the whole way through that in that instant is quite remarkable. And so once again, we turn to.
Wait a minute. So,
Sorry.
Mike here, Majestic Buck. So, I read this book like 7 years ago while I was incarcerated, so I haven't seen it in a while. I don't have it in front of me. Some questions just came up that was very powerful for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about, what we just talked about previously about my journey of men's work. I wonder how does that affect me? Because I feel kind of like, yes, I'm helping men, but I do it for me. I mean, I get a lot of gold out of that. I feel wonderful for doing that. So my question is, is that warrior, or is that me, myself, being greedy or selfish? So that kind of, I'm a little bit lost right now. So I don't know, maybe you can speak to that for me.
Yeah. Well, I think you're looking at it in a kind of categorical imperative way too. Like if I get anything out of something, then is it wrong? I mean, you can't. Well, I mean, perhaps we can speak in that way, but I don't know if it would be quite as accurate. Then what?
I guess maybe it's not as warrior as I thought by doing that. You know what I mean? It's a good thing. I maybe I'm thinking, because maybe I'm thinking warrior as something like like I said, the guy who goes to work at a job that he hates. He's really doing something that he doesn't like.
Is that warrior?
Or a better? That to me is what I kind of think is warrior. So maybe I'm even totally lost at what my thinking of warrior should be.
Yeah. So for you, it's all about a higher purpose. But remember, Moore and Gillette talked about he knows what he wants and he knows how to get it. So, he knows what he wants. And going for what you want is warrior as well. And so I would challenge you in your thinking about, doing 10, 20, whatever years at a job that he hates for the family. Is that really warrior in his fullness, or is that something else?
Yeah, and actually that clarified it for me a little bit, what you just said, knowing what you want. And using that model also, I can see it might not be warrior, because all right, a man who does that, he could have stepped into his warrior and actually got trained into something else and able to find work doing what he likes. So
yeah. To me it resembles masochism, which is the one of the shadow polarities of warrior. So I guess it would still be warrior, but on the shadow side.
Can I?
Yeah, please. Yes.
What really helps me a lot in this book, because I found myself spending a lot of time on page 16 and 17, the triangles, explaining the immature, dysfunctional part, and then in the fullness. But then I turned to 18, 19, which shows the pyramid as a three-dimensional object, where each plane of the archetype, they all lean into each other. So, so at all times, so it's easy to be deceived or misunderstand, rather. Page 16 and 17, we were seeing it as a two-dimensional triangle, and then to always bear in mind that it's actually one plane of the cube. So in one plane, and each plane is depending on the other one, on the other one. Even in the dysfunctional, form as well. But it's so the warrior will borrow some aroma from the king, perhaps. you know, and I mean, in a scholastic level, learning about the warrior just focused on that is good, but to always bear in mind the context, that it's always existing context, that it's just one of the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Stavros. That actually, I kind of lose sight of that. It is, everything inside is pulling, and it is all connected to make it work properly. It all has to be
Yeah,
connected.
I always think about the parable about the three blind men describing the elephant, where one grabs the foot and says, "Oh, the elephant's like a tree." The other one says, "No, the elephant's like a wall." Then he grabs the tail. You know, like it's all part of it. Each one of them is a part of the truth.
Yes.
And so we have to expand our vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe this next section will help us put together the king and the warrior together. And maybe I'm giving away a little that way, but I'm okay with that. So here we are in the home stretch of our conversation today. Listen, again, it's 30 years after the publication of this book. A lot has changed in the United States. Hashtag Me Too, hashtag Black Lives Matter, indiscriminate public gun violence, privatized prison system, privatized military, white-collar crimes not being punished. Are there any other contemporary challenges here that, by the way, the white-collar crimes create conditions that foster all other kinds of crime, in my opinion. So who should really be prosecuted here? So are there any other contemporary challenges before we move on and try and talk about these challenges? Black Lives Matter, Me Too, gun violence, privatized prison system, military, privatized, white-collar crimes. And all of these phenomena stem from or make possible the misuse and abuse of warrior energy, if not shadow warrior energy. So again, what are some other phenomena, recent or historic even, that give rise to the abuse of warrior energy or give rise to shadow warrior energy?
Our politics today.
Right? How are they? Yeah, pretty divisive. And I've lost a lot of friends on Facebook just because I'm like, I don't like your views. I'm leaving, It's really awful on Facebook these days. It was such a happy place before.
Well, what comes up for me is just the whole attitude of blame. That someone's responsible for my misfortune or someone's responsible for the problems we're having. Like, like anytime you point your finger and project, whether you point it at capitalism or whether you point it at, like the pyramid, it's one, focusing on one thing is just looking at part of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so
but it's part of the truth, no?
Yeah, it is part of the truth indeed. But there's a lack of it, an absence of nuance.
Okay.
In our world, which is such an obstacle.
Got it. Yeah.
And to hold more than one idea simultaneously, I don't know. I don't want to lose track of it, but
yeah.
That's what comes up for me. Like anything you discussed, like Me Too, or like Time's Up, or Black Lives Matter. I don't know. It seems to. I applaud the intent, the intention of it, and I'm troubled by the reaction to it. You know, that the reaction is that all these things are not more nuanced, and the expression. I think forgive me, I'm getting rambling.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So let's use this as kind of a case study.
I would say personal accountability as well.
Okay. Yeah. Personal accountability, absolutely, and sometimes lack of it.
Right, that's what I mean. The
Yeah,
lack
yeah.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's use Me Too as kind of a case study. And so, just starting from the top, what is it about Me Too that points to an abusive relationship between men and their sexual conquests? So, just very generally, what is it historically? So, for people who are watching this 10, 50 years from now, you know, what can we say about Me Too today?
And Me Too is all about addressing power that's based on the weakness of others.
Based on the weakness of others,
The power would
maybe
not
exploits.
Yeah, well, the power would not exist unless somebody, one party would not be. Its power is totally dependent on the weakness of another.
Ah, yes, got it.
That's the only context of its power. It's
Yeah.
not power within itself.
So like a parasite almost, or
Right.
maybe.
Yeah. So, like, Me Too. I mean, it has it has something similar to it, like the abolitionist movement.
Mhm.
It's just that where you have an entire gender
Mhm.
that has unwritten being held down by unwritten rules and glass ceilings,
Yeah.
that are very evident, very documented. This is evidence based.
Yeah.
It's not just perception,
Right.
and it gets exploited. So so Me Too is really it can be generalized to all forms of power, but specifically from women.
Yeah. What are some of the arguments against the Me Too movement? Stavros mentioned some of the arguments of the Me Too movement, but what are we hearing in opposition to these claims of sexual abuse and sexual exploitation?
Well, I definitely feel that I don't want to just say men in this. I love women, and quite honestly, I believe women have a lot of power themselves. So I don't want to just say the Me Too is all about men exploiting women.
Okay.
I have, and I'll use an example. One of my friends, who is not in the industry anymore, but she was an exotic dancer, absolutely beautiful woman, and I would kind of talk to her and say, "Well, you're basically the conversation is you're being exploited," and she would laugh at me. And she says, "No, Mike, I'm the guy in power. I'm the one who has these guys here slobbering, giving me money." She chose to do it, but she, whether she was or wasn't, but she felt she was the one in power,
Mhm.
and the men were the weak ones in that. So I would just worry about saying it's all only men abusing women in that. That's it.
Okay.
No comments. It got quiet.
Well, actually, no, and I just don't. I want to stay on topic and not do crosstalk. I mean, because I have a reaction to that, but I don't know if it's appropriate for me to deal with you.
Let's hear what you are what that brought up, because maybe it was a little quiet because go ahead, Stavros.
Okay. Um, um, I mean, the dancer and the men who are slobbering over her, they're all in the same cage. Like the men are just as much of a victim of the patriarchy as women in this respect. I mean, I've gone to plenty of titty bars, and and I've seen men acting in ways that aren't even genuine. That they're so out of touch with their own masculinity. It's almost like a play. The dancer does a certain move and they react a certain way. They're all in the same dark room, and kind of reminds me when I once was at a restaurant with all these lobsters were in the water, and one lobster had a claw that didn't have a rubber band. It was terrorizing the other ones. I mean, it was just like that's what it appears to me. So I mean, the fact that these men are in a titty bar, myself included, is a lack of my own agency among women. That I'm going to this place where everyone is who they're supposed to be, acting the way they're supposed to be, totally predictable.
Mm-hmm.
There's no warrior spirit in the titty bar. No one's facing the unknown there. Mm-hmm. That's my reaction to what you said. I mean, there's something else that I want to say about the reaction towards Me Too, but I don't want to walk away from what I just said to you. If there's anything else.
Well, and that's fine, and I actually agree with you. I think it might have been a bad example, but I'm just trying to say that it isn't all. I don't think in anything in life can you say it's just one pitting against the other. That's all. I guess what I'm trying to say
in that respect. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reactions against Me Too is the pushback is sorry to take so long. But I keep thinking about Ansari Aziz, the actor.
Yeah.
He went on a bad date.
Uh-huh.
Basically, he was not abusing his power. Like, he was clearly a case of misunderstand of people. Just here's a case of nobody being present within themselves. Of just acting out. He's acting like a big star. She's acting like a groupie, and everyone's amazed by what happened. And that's my judgment and perception.
Yeah.
But so once again, people being reactive and throwing nuance to the wind, is part of the reaction. I don't know if it's against, but it certainly doesn't help. And if anything, it's being blown up and misunderstood to weaken Me Too, which I think is a legitimate level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about Ansari Aziz and the whole power dynamic between star and groupie, just, kind of making more magnified the power dynamic between men and women, and so it's a great illustration because it shows us the difference between the man who's in power and the woman who, I don't know this exact situation, but it sounds like that he may have fumbled and done something Me Too-y. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not Harvey Weinstein.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a new. And this is even beyond nuance.
Uh-huh.
Where you have a predator, a powerful predator.
Okay.
And here you have, a couple of sheep just stumbling over each other.
I see.
So in any case, I don't know if it's pushback, but I think it's good pushback is that demanding nuance or understanding and not being reactive. Because I think okay, the dysfunctional low level form of masculinity is either to be belligerently reactive or to be the weakling. Isn't that the other half of it as well? So you have
the tyrant and the weakling.
Actually, that was the king over there, but it's the
Yeah,
sadist,
king,
the
yeah.
masochist, or the grandstanding bully. But yeah, but well, like the other plane. There are many men who are like going like this, you know, and like assuming the guilt of others.
Mhm.
You know, so they're not being the warrior in terms of just standing, you know, and enduring bravely.
Okay. Wait, presuming the guilt of others?
Assuming, like, you know, assuming the guilt of others. That is to
Uh-huh.
say that that there are men who I believe are folding or feeling terrified or terrorized by Me Too because
Okay.
because they're not looking at it squarely, and they're just
Okay. I think I got you.
yeah, maybe you can elaborate better, but yeah, but just, you know, grouping themselves, being fearful of you know, because, you know, identifying themselves with the sins of others, perhaps, you know,
Mhm.
or but I
Yeah.
think I might have gone tangential with you on that. Right?
No, I mean you're addressing how men have responded to these claims of sexual abuse, both individually and collectively, and I think that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question would be, and this is kind of going into another territory now, how might we characterize defense of such sexual abuse or exploitation of power? You know, on NWTAs we say we do not exploit the weakness of others. How might we characterize the defense of sexual abuse?
I mean, how do we perceive people who defend sexual abuse?
Of how do we characterize people who are saying, "Oh, well, Me Too," you know, that's just some lesbian effort to,
Oh, okay.
you know, castrate
Okay.
men. You know,
Mm-hmm.
how would we characterize that? Is it a legitimate concern?
Oh, it's a concern that people think that way, by all means.
Yes, yes. And how would we characterize them when they have those concerns?
Oh, okay. But well, I would characterize.
Scott, did you have something?
Anyone else want to speak? Because I do a lot.
Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, pity, sadness that they cannot look beyond themselves and understand someone else's perspective. That there's, again, this is not very un-samurai like. You're focused more on yourself and your well-being, living in denial about other people's. Sort of like, I'm right, you're wrong, so therefore you don't exist. I'm negating you. So when somebody you know, acts with disbelief or is refusing to accept that this is a reality in life, I'm sad. I pity them. That
So
they
you feel,
can't.
you feel compassion, Scott, yes?
Yeah,
You feel
there's a compassion in there.
Yeah.
So that's your reaction to them. I'm still looking for, and here's the rationale behind the question, because this, I believe, is where the king and the warrior intersect. The way the king can abdicate certain responsibilities, the way the king can be tyrannical and say, oh, well, this and this and this is for your own good, or however, you know. So I guess the real question is, in what ways might the Shadow King help to hide, repress, or deny the conduct of the Shadow Warrior? Does that make sense?
By saying that he condones it. The Shadow King, by not stepping in, by his silence, condones it.
Either by not stepping in, or that would be the weakling. How might the tyrant react?
Oh, encouraging and applauding.
Right.
Yeah.
Supporting.
It's necessary for survival to get what I want, to be aggressive and assertive without regard to other people.
Yeah. And so the shadow of the king really is very much present in this defense of Me Too, or abdication of power from responsibility for me too, as much as the shadow warrior is at play here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just, I guess, breathe into that and kind of.
Well, the Shadow Warrior and the Shadow King both don't, they both lack the discernment of seeing, you know, that that they can choose a higher way.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both in the dark together,
Mm-hmm.
you know, reinforcing each other's presence in the dark.
Right.
You know, and even justifying each other's presence in the dark.
Yes. Yes, I think that's clear. And yeah, lack of discernment, lack of agency, saying, "Oh well, you know, no, you don't have a say here."
Mm-hmm. I mean, I mean, I use this phrase myself. When I hear people say, and I say, "Well, I didn't have any choice."
Mm-hmm.
Just unconditionally, you always have a choice. You may not like what they are or the result of the choice, but you always, always, always have a choice.
Yeah.
Without exception, anytime, anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
What's that in the I group? When we say
I statements, yes.
Yeah, I always have a choice, not you.
Yeah.
So there's a gesture for that, isn't there?
This.
Is that what it is to
Yeah.
say when someone's going, like, you know, you speak in third, like, yeah, I have a choice always, yeah.
So I'm going to read two more passages just to describe a little deeper the shadow warrior on both its polarities. Starting on page 92, beginning with "We don't have to look far." Okay. "We don't have to look far to see this destructive warrior operating in our own lives. Sadly, we must not acknowledge it in the workplace whenever a boss puts down, harasses, unjustly fires, or in many other ways mistreats or subordinates. We must also acknowledge the sadist in our homes, in the appalling statistics of wife beating and child abuse. Although we may all become vulnerable to the sadistic warrior at some time or another, there is particular personality types that has this energy in spades, as we say. This is the compulsive personality disorder. Compulsive personalities are workaholics, Mike, going back to your point, constantly with their noses to the grindstone. They have a tremendous capacity to endure pain, and they often manage to get an enormous amount of work done. But when what is driving their nonstop engines is deep anxiety, the hero's desperation, they have a very slim grasp on the sense of their own worthwhileness. They don't know what it is they really want, what they are missing and would like to have. They spend their lives attacking everything and everyone, their jobs, their life tasks before them, themselves, and others. In the process, they are eaten alive by a sadistic warrior and soon reach burnout. So that's the sadist. A masochist, on page 94, the passive pole, where it says the masochist is the passive pole. Does someone want to read that until to the very end of that paragraph? It's a big paragraph.
I'll do it if nobody else wants.
Great.
Okay. The masochist is the passive pole of the warrior shadow, that pushover and whipped puppy that lies just beneath the sadist's rageful displays. Men are right to fear the coward within them, even if they don't have a sense of fear, even if they don't have the sense to fear their macho exteriors. The masochist projects warrior energy onto others and causes a man to experience himself as powerless. The man possessed by the masochist is unable to defend himself psychologically. He allows others and himself to push him around, to exceed the limits of what he can tolerate and tolerate and still keep his self-respect, not to mention his psychological and physical health. All of us, no matter what walk of life, can fall under the pressure of the warrior's bipolar shadow in any area of our lives. It may be that we don't know when to quit an impossible relationship, a circle of friends, or a frustrating job. We all know the saying, quit while you're ahead, or learn to cut your losses. The compulsive personality, no matter what the danger signs, no matter how impossible the dream, and how unbeatable the foe, digs in and works harder, trying to get blood from a turnip and watching his gold turn to ashes in the end. If we are under the power of the masochist, we will take a far too much abuse for far too long and then explode in sadistic outbursts of verbal and even psychological violence. This kind of oscillation between the active and the passive roles of archetypal shadows is characteristic of those dysfunctional systems. Whoa.
So as we, what's that?
Whoa.
Yeah. As we see, even the weakling for the king or the masochist for the warrior can kick it up after being abused for far too long and engage in either the tyrant, if in the king energies, or the sadist in the warrior energies. And so I would say that there's kind of he uses the word bipolar in a, like, just in the diagram sentence, this is a dyadic relationship. Well, I would say, it's a schizoid or bipolar reaction when we're talking about someone who's repressing their anger and their self-hatred. And, that could come in at many forms. It could be, why am I like this? Why aren't I like this? Just fill in the blank. And then it kicks into high gear, and then we lash out on everyone around us. Anyone who will give us a listening ear, and we become the tyrant, and we become sadistic. So it's a time to kind of be self-reflective. But, and this is an interesting question that I have come up with, don't we reward people who are sadistic in this American United States society? And don't we punish people who are masochistic and just keep piling on the crap on top of them? I mean, that's a little bit of a rhetorical question too, but I mean, it seems to ring true for me. So my question to you would be, in what ways have you lived in the polarities of sadist and masochist? And practically speaking, what needs to shift for you so you can operate in the mature warrior energies? Any men may begin. Are you willing to admit that you've lived as a sadist or as a masochist? I mean, some of us, yeah. So some of us have disclosed a little of that already.
What I struggle with in the business world is, do you have to be an asshole leader to be successful? So I've worked for people, a man who was a sadist, very successful, but he would humiliate, punish, demean. I mean, he was a real, And the question again is that why he's successful? And we see that in other aspects of business. You'll see people who are real jerks. You've heard about them. The head of Apple, Steve Jobs, was real. The head of Disney, Mike Eisner, they were real mean jerks. Is that what you have to be in order to be successful? And on the flip side, I've worked for this man who's a sadist, and I call myself a man, for enduring that for 15 years. That humiliation, the constant put down and demeaning and demoralizing type relationships. I didn't quit while I was ahead. I lived it. I breathed it for 15 years and then quit.
Okay.
Yeah, that was really a very good example. There's a Scott, your picture just changed.
I think he's answering the door. I heard a knock.
Oh, okay. That's pretty funny. So, yeah, I know for myself, speaking personally, there was a time when I took great pride in my anger years ago, that I really felt that I was being effective. And but your original question, Daniel, I'm sorry.
Yeah. In what ways have you lived in the polarities between sadist and masochist? And what needs to shift for you?
I used to believe in the saying, the big fish eats the small fish. Mm-hmm. And I used to live by that, you know, where I worked for abusive people and I would give me the right to be abusive down the food chain. I mean, in the past, I mean, no longer now, but I was being very, one of the reasons why I spoke very passionately about someone's strength being dependent on the weakness of others, because that was my MO at one time. Mm-hmm. And but yeah, just to see in terms of everything being in the food chain, you know, and that's how I've done it.
Yeah. Good.
Interesting. Mike Majestic Buck here. You know, working on ships, being literally in prison in the middle of the ocean with anywhere from 20 to 40 men. And I had worked my way up to a position of authority. My own lack of self-worth, I was so struck by trying to be the good boss for the people, for the men that I'm telling them their job, and yet being beat on by my superiors as to what they want. And where I would need to step up is that my own lack of self-worth kept me from actually standing up for what I thought was right, and in how I was managing my men. I will say that I would like to say, and I have some evidence from feedback from these men, that my compassion and my ability not to go ballistic on people and understand that there's millions of ways to do one thing, and if it gets done the way I like it, it's fine. That I was a very good administrator, and you don't need to be that brutal asshole. And I honestly believe that by not being that asshole, I probably got more out of my men in their work and everything. So I don't think that is a necessity to be successful. My humble opinion.
Yeah, it could be a sign of insecurity.
Actually, to me, it shows that they don't know what they're doing. Actually, it's their insecurity that they don't know their job. Is how I look at it, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah. Well, we're at our time boundary right now, but we will check out. As you leave this workshop today, let's think about our ability to lead and others' abilities to lead or inability to lead. You know, because these are some solid examples that we can just take home. During this session, you may have gone to some uncomfortable places. But yeah, where this path leads, you will know for yourself. You will go on to places, and hopefully this will help you grow, not diminish in your ability to lead. So I invite you to check out with your name, your primary feeling now, and in a word or a phrase, something you take from this workshop. We'll check out in the same order we checked in. Mike?
I'm checking out grateful. I feel that I got a lot out of this. I I think the biggest thing I got out of it is to be able to, or maybe learn to a better degree how to look at myself and keep my own power and stuff in check, to keep my warrior in check. I judge that at times I do get rather tyrannical, as you say, and obviously want people to do and accept my ideas. So it was very eye-opening to hear that, or maybe eye-opening to realize that I need to actually maybe even look deeper and have a bigger hold on that.
Mhm.
So I check out Grateful. I'm in and I'm out.
Oh. Scott, were you next?
Yeah, Scott, Emperor Penguin, Joy. And at this point in time, after 2 sessions, the greatest takeaway for me is, I guess, the awareness that I need to forgive myself.
Mm.
Oh.
So,
Yeah. Stavros.
Okay, Stavros, Noble Radiant Owl, and I'm checking out Feeling Connected. Hearing what other men, all you men in this group, hear the same words as me, and hearing your interpretations and feeling the diversity of your interpretations and the unity in your interpretations, we interpret at the same time. So, and feeling grateful. Thank you, Daniel. I mean, this book really deserves a couple of readings, and and rereading it is really, it's just great to just have different planes of consciousness to compare.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the 3-dimensional. It's like the pyramid. It's not a triangle. It's a pyramid. There's other. There's more than one way to look at it.
Yeah.
And in each one, there's no one way, and it's great feeling it and experiencing it. And with that, I'm out.
Great. Eric.
Eric, Big Moose, checking out with gratitude. I'm grateful to be on the call. And thing that I'm taking away is basically a newfound way of interpreting warrior and just how different ways I could apply it in my life, and also how different ways I could view my actions in my life. Yeah, with that, I'm out.
Oh. And Daniel Sage, feeling happy still, feeling relief in a different way. I wasn't sure how the Me Too part was going to go. Happy we were able to, in a really good way, kind of talk about something that could be possibly divisive, inflammatory. And one thing I get from this conversation today is I heard anew the straightforwardness, that being a characteristic of the king, of the warrior, is mature. So being straightforward can be a sign of maturity. It doesn't have to be asshole-ish. It doesn't have to be aggressive. It can be just be warrior. With that, I'm out. So, man, I'm grateful for you. Thank you, everyone, and I will look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Daniel.
Yeah, Mike.
So I have
I'm not recording anymore. Wait, am I?
Good.
Wait.